Hello everybody, Glitch Reaper here. I'm back for some, darn lips. I'm back for some more Magic Duel story mode, and we are here at the Trials of Amonkhet again. I'm going to do the second one, which is the Trial of Knowledge. Now, the interesting thing is, there's a very specific way that you solve it, but I'm going to see what happens if I purposefully do it wrong first, or at least I'm going to show what happens when you purposefully do it wrong first. But here's the story. Grand illusionary labyrinth within Kefnet's monument twists and turns you in all directions. You are in the domain of the god of knowledge, who challenges you to employ your wits to pass through. The walls themselves move like liquid beneath your touch. Yeah, that is touch, not torch. I was gonna say, it's a little lit. Strange phantasmal forms grasp at you. You struggle to make sense of your bewildering surroundings before you are lost. Nice ghostly phantom they had floating around there. There are two challenges to overcome if you hope to proceed. To overcome the first, defeat the Sphinx this turn. Here's the Sphinx that they're talking about. We have a couple of walls, but it's not exactly how things play out exactly. So I'm going to show what happens when you attempt to literally defeat the Sphinx this turn, because this is the Sphinx. It's a curator of mysteries, so it's a flying 4/4 blue creature. Subtype is Sphinx for about 4 mana overall, 2 generic and 2 blue. So it seems like okay. As whenever you cycle a card or discard another card, scry 1, cycling 1 blue. It doesn't seem like that impressive of a creature to be after. The real goal is to defeat the Trial of Knowledge. But I'm going to show what happens when things don't go exactly that way. I'm going to hold on to these cards here and just show what happens whenever I go right to the attack phase. Because this is a little bit different. Probably one of the most unique out of the whole game, actually. And you can't untap these the regular way because they have this special effect on them. As these are glyph keepers, there's a couple of things you come with. They're actually quite powerful and interesting. They're a 5/3 flying blue creature that's subtype is Sphinx for 3 generic and 2 blue, so about 5 overall. They have flying, and you can embalm them for 5 and 2 blue. So you can do that whole token copy thing. But they also have this special ability here that you just observed. Whenever Glyph Keeper becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, counter that spell or ability. They just automatically negate the first spell or ability placed on them each turn. And this is why you can't win this one just by going into combat. Is because if you try to go all out with them, then the next thing that'll happen is, well, you get smacked by that Sphinx. But it doesn't do it just with the whole thing. It terminates briefly. The swirling mists overtake you and the Sphinx soars victoriously. Determined to prove yourself worthy, you begin again. And that automatically just says try again. Which I find interesting. You're kind of locked into this one because it's a bit different win conditions to normal. Now I'm going to show the real way to win this one. You got to remember that you have a good amount of mana to work with here, as you have 3 islands and 3 mountains. So overall, you've got 3 blue and 3 red mana to work this turn. Now you also have this guy, the Vizier Tumbling Sands. His special ability is simply you tap him, you untap another target permanent. And for 2 generic and 1 blue, that's actually kind of nice to be able to untap other creatures. Blue tends to famously have tapping and untapping as one of its things in its repertoire that tends to happen a lot. You could otherwise cycle this guy if he was actually in your hand for 1 and 1 blue. And you could theoretically also, whenever you cycle him, untap a permanent right there. And by untapping target permanent, that means it's not just other creatures either. You could untap an artifact that you have, or even a land to get an additional point of mana back. So this guy's ability is actually pretty diverse for a blue creature of that generic mana level. But the thing is, you've got to incorporate him into the strategy to actually win, because you're not really defeating the Sphinx. You're taking out the LP of the Trial of Knowledge here, which is represented by Kefnet. So the real thing to do is remember they negate one spell or ability of any sort that targets them whenever they're targeted each turn. So I cast my magma spray on it. It negates that. So instead of taking any damage, it's just stopped cold. I also can... The thing is, you can in fact target something for untapping if it's already untapped. And that's where this comes in. You use his ability, this Glyph Keeper negates it. So now they're both open for use. And this is where this card comes in, Open into Wonder. X and 2 blue. This is an interesting sorcery. X target creatures can't be blocked this turn. Until end of turn, those creatures gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So, basically, Open into Wonder lets you kind of go all out blue style. And I'm going to pay X as 2, because I just need 2 creatures to be unblockable. Now, because of their ability to negate that once per turn, that means that you have to have that much mana all in one turn to be able to do this. And that's basically what this special scenario gives you. So now they're unblockable, so the fact that you'd have flyers versus flyers is no longer relevant at all. And again, as often happens in our story mode, the answer is to go all out. So it just comes out to an all-out assault. How often has that really happened in my story mode videos? Seriously? But either way, the Glyph Keepers win over Kefnet because they just flew right past the other flyers completely. They've been outmaneuvered. Excellent. Prepare yourself for the final challenge of this trial. Kefnet the Mindful awaits. And note that this goes directly into it. This particular quest is, again, different in more than one way. And I'm probably going to show you how. To overcome this challenge, defeat Kefnet. Physical combat is useless here. You must find another way. There's actually a very specific series of events that you need to go through to do this. I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to kind of go through what your first instincts would be and how counterintuitive this solution is. But you've got 5 points of life, no creatures around, and Kefnet the Mindful is ready to attack. Is in literally his literal god card. And this shows you what the power of a god card in this set is like. For just 2 generic and 1 blue, you get a 5/5 indestructible legendary creature, god subtype, literally. And his other special abilities are that he can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in hand. Well, the enemy has 7 or more cards in hand. So that's covered. And the thing about some god cards is they may have some stipulation on them, but that was partially a carryover from older sets that had a special stipulation on whether or not they could actually attack or block, but that they'd always have some other ability available. Well, that's also true here in Amonkhet. For 3 generic and 1 blue, you can draw a card, then you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. Well, basically that can put 2 cards in your hand really fast, so if you're trying to build up to be able to attack and block with them, that's how you're kind of meant to do that if you have no other real option. So you can trigger it very quickly. So this is kind of the power of Amonkhet. Now, here's what your instinct would be. The fact is that you only have 5 points of life, and the first time they attack, they're gonna defeat you instantly. So your first instinct is use all that you have here to scour their deck. Well, here's kind of what happens if you go through this. You'd see you have Traumatize. Target player puts half of his or her library rounded down into his or her graveyard. That's a pretty good card, so let's show what happens whenever you blast them with that. Okay, 15 gone. That's impressive. We have a couple things left. We have Thought Scour, and we have this thing called the Sands of Delirium that you... now, this one has X. You tap it, and target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Well, you have 10 points of mana remaining this turn, and this over here, Thought Scour, only costs 1 blue mana. It says target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, draw a card. So let's see what would happen if you unleash all of that as much as you possibly could in order. So that would take an additional 9 off. And Thought Scour takes another 2. So let's see how close you'd really get. You get yourself an island. They'd have 4 cards left in their deck, and might add, this is where things come in special. And this is why you'd have to do it that turn, because now Kefnet gets to attack. And this one does go to its conclusion. Unlike the other one that's just like, oh, by the way, you need to try again. Since Kefnet's displeasure, your failure. His challenges seem insurmountable, but you steal your mind for another attempt. Now, if you try again, you continue from the second trial. If you immediately continue. So, here you are with this puzzle on the combat field. Now, the key to this puzzle is realizing that these particular decks are pre-ordered. There's no randomization here. So, what you have to work with can get you to victory if you analyze the problem. And this originally took me a bit of trial and error. But the real solution is to start off by using Thought Scour on yourself. The thing is, because it's a pre-ordered deck, you will get the same card every time whenever you peel off an exact position off. Now, you can tell this is a very special deck just because most of it is actually islands. Now, the next thing to do is to cast Traumatize on yourself. So you will be putting half your library, additionally, into your graveyard. Now you can see that there's mostly islands. A good portion of this really was just meant to be filler, just to make sure that you used exact positions. Now, the next thing to do is to use the Sands of Delirium, but you have to hold on to 5 more mana overall to cast this card. So, you've got 9, and this is where the game notation really helps out, because it's illustrating you have 9 islands untapped. That means you need to spend about 4, and then that'll get you into a good position. But also watch very carefully what's going on here. The thing is that they have a very specific number of cards in their deck too, so the idea is to do it just exactly. Psychic Spiral is a very powerful card because it shuffles all the cards from your graveyard into your library, and target player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into their graveyard. And in this game, it'll actually do notations to show you kind of what your stats are in terms of those sort of relevant details. It says you have 26 cards in your graveyard. It's just kind of a ridiculous number that almost never naturally comes up. It's like absurdly rare. But since it costs 5, I had to hold on to 5 more. Now, whenever I do this, the fact is I have 26 cards in my graveyard, and they have 26 left from my previous little assault with Sands of Delirium here. So, whenever I do this, and target them, then what will happen is I'll shuffle all these back into my library. This one will settle there, but I also exactly canceled out how many cards they had left. And when you can't draw another card at the beginning of your turn, unless you have something that says otherwise, then you automatically lose the game. So the way of defeating Kefnet in one turn was to basically use your deck as not buck. I'm not hunting here. There's no deer involved. Ignore I said buck. So yes, picture antlers on me for instead of horns because I said that. No. What you're basically doing is you're using your deck as bulk. Bulk is in a large amount of stuff. Bulk ammunition. So you're using your deck as a cannon to just blow them away. That's what you're really doing there. And now we can continue with the story. You manage to compose your thoughts and outwit the labyrinth. As you pass through the final doorway, you suddenly find yourself before Kefnet. He does not look up as you enter. He anticipated your arrival long ago. He offers you his reward, the cartouche of knowledge. Now that you've proven your mental fortitude, the trial of strength can begin. Yeah, there's like various reasonings in the lore behind why there's these 5 trials and why they're in a certain order. You can see Kefnet there looking onward as he's just awaiting. Like, yep, that's right. I knew you were coming. What do you expect? But you can see the nice hieroglyphics around here, so appreciate the view. But for now, I'll be logging off. Hope to hear from you all later. Bye for now, everybody. And remember, Friday Night Magic.